Scripture this morning is from Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9 of the Jewish Publication Society. After sharing the Ten Commandments with Moses, God tells us how to make them part of our lives. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you're traveling on the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them on your hand as a sign and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the door frames of your house and on your gates.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. This call to prayer is something that happens very often in services in synagogues. For several years, I played the organ for High Holy Days for a synagogue in Los Gatos, California, and I came to love that call. It says, "Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is one." This concept of one God, of monotheism, is something that came late to the Jewish people. In their territory, not just the Jewish people, to the people who were living in the Middle East, there were many other gods. There were pantheistic. And it's interesting, in our Bible study discussion, we realized that this doesn't say there aren't other gods. It just says Yahweh, our God, is the one, is the one that we are called to worship. And I thought that was an interesting concept, that it doesn't deny that there are other gods, and we all have other gods in our lives, if you admit it, that we worship other things. But in the final analysis, God is one. God is our God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. We've taken this command as part of our mission statement, which is love God. I'm inviting you, love one another, love our neighbors as ourselves. I think we need to do that again. Love God. Love one another, love our neighbors as ourselves. Jesus took this basic command from this group of 10 and added loving your neighbor to it. He said the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God, and the second, which is equal to it, is to love your neighbor. And it seems to me that this whole business about the 10 Commandments is less about you need to do this, and more about, think about how you live your life. How is it that you can be in community with others, that you can live on this planet and share it not just with people, but with all of nature, all of creation? Well, there's a program called Godly Play, which is a program for bringing Bible stories to young children. And in it, storytellers are trained how to tell stories with various sorts of accompaniments, little figures, a box of sand for the desert, a big rock for the mountain. And they don't read the stories, they tell the stories, so that kids understand what the stories are about. They're not just written on the pages of the Bible, but they're real stories about what it's like to live in the desert where it's dangerous. We saw a video of the particular story that tells the story of the 10 Commandments. Only in Godly Play, they're called the 10 Best Ways. Don't serve other gods, make no idols to worship, be serious when you say my name, keep the Sabbath holy. These are the ones that talk about how we worship and what our relationship with God is. And the rest are about how we treat each other. Honor your father and mother, don't kill, don't break your marriage, don't steal, don't lie, don't even want what others have. They save the hardest till the last almost, I think. So these aren't a list of things that you have to do. They are, but they invite us to think about what it is they mean. How can we live a life better using these guidelines? Well, I know we all kind of have guidelines or little sayings that help us live our lives. Do you have something that you use that helps you live your life better, that reminds you who you are and whose you are? Anybody want to share? Yes?
Form follows function. Form follows function.
Form follows function. That's a Len.
Would I really want to explain this to my grandpa?
Would I really want to explain this to my grandma? That's kind of a good guideline. Anybody else? What are those things? Yes?
One of the ones that regularly runs through my mind is the old do unto others.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What we call the golden rule. And that golden rule appears in every world religion. Every single one. It's worded in different ways. But that appears in every single world religion.
There's another one that we often used to use in Sunday school, and that was, what would Jesus do?
What would Jesus do? I think it kind of got carried away in the recent years, but I think it's a good one. What would Jesus do? It helps us hold up a yardstick against what we're doing. Mark.
Avoid making assumptions or priorities for your things,
Give
give them the benefit of the doubt.
people the benefit of the doubt. That's actually in our congregational covenant. It's one of the things when we sign up and say we want to be part of this community, that's one thing we agree to do. Give people the benefit of the doubt. You see up here? Yes.
Well, I would always say, you have consequences for your choices. And I remember when Tyler was first driving, he would always say, go as fast as you can pay for it.
Go as fast as the ticket you can pay for. Go as fast when you're driving. Go as fast as the ticket you can pay for, which anymore is not over the speed limit. My mother used to always say, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And she meant it. And she actually lived that way. Yes?
Love is here to stay, and that is enough.
Love is here to stay, and that is enough. Oh, I love that. Yes?
My mother always told me to do the white shirts first, meaning that was the hardest task, and that you got the hardest thing to do out of your way.
Do the white shirts first, because they're the hardest ones to do. So get the hard thing done first. Yes?
My grandma always used to say, a job worth doing is a job worth doing well.
A job worth doing is a job worth doing well. I think I remember that one too.
Live and learn. If you don't start learning, you aren't going to be living long.
Live and learn. If you don't start learning, you're not going to be living long.
Honesty is the best policy.
Honesty is the best policy. You got the idea, right? You got the idea. So these 10 commandments are for our own good. They're to help us live our lives better. And when we can live our lives better, we have a better understanding of the person who's next to us and the person who's across the ocean from us and whoever might be out in space waiting for us to connect. Well, I was thinking a lot about all of these things during this week. There are a couple of things that are happening. Today is actually National Coming Out Day, which is about letting people be who they are. And I think that's really important that we acknowledge that, like Thomas Merton said, that we let people be who they are, live out their lives. Also, I think tomorrow is Columbus Day. And I'm having a lot of trouble with Columbus Day this year, probably because of the time I spent during my sabbatical, both in New Mexico interacting with 5 native elders, and then my trip up the California Mission Trail and really seeing what happened to the indigenous folks when the Spanish came in with the missions. And I think we have to rethink Columbus. And part of the problem for me, I'm not saying Columbus was a bad man. In my struggle with all of this, a friend of mine said the other day, good people sometimes do bad things. And that helped me a lot to understand. We don't have to string Columbus up by his thumbs necessarily. But he was operating under the assumption of what's come to be called the doctrine of discovery. And this was put forth by popes before Columbus. And the idea was, if we go someplace else and the people aren't Christian, we get to tell them what to do. Columbus discovered America. Well, there were people living here, right? So I think Columbus did something amazing, helping us understand the world isn't flat. That certainly is one thing. But to wholesale take over and claim a land just because the people there aren't Christian, that doesn't seem very Christian to me, does it? So as we go through tomorrow, and every time an ad comes up on the TV about Columbus Day sale, Columbus Day this, it's like, ooh, I'm thinking about that. Because it's not the straightforward thing we were taught in school. We weren't taught all of the aspects of the Columbus story. We were taught the pretty parts. So if we can find new ways without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and say, okay, Columbus, you did some good stuff, but there was some other stuff that really wasn't so good. And how does that affect who we are and how we approach other people? How are we about building empire in the world? I think in a lot of ways we are. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. The doctrine of discovery is embedded in a lot of United States law. And I think a lot of people are looking at this now to understand how we can better operate without making that the goal. Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon's Collins Lecture this year on November 19th is on the doctrine of discovery. So we'll have more information about that later if you're interested in that. As I was thinking about all this, I was really impressed during the week to see that the City Council in Portland has declared tomorrow, October 12th, Indigenous Peoples Day. And this is a way to respond to what happened when Columbus wholesale took over the country, claimed the country, which already had people living in it. So that we can say, let's remember the indigenous people who were here at that time as well. Let's hold them in prayer and understand how we mistreated them and continue in many ways to mistreat them. So, it's a whole lot to grab onto, but it seems to me that the 10 Commandments convict us to respond in this way, to be careful about how we talk about things and how we take over wholesale places, countries, cities, states. How is it that we are acting from this doctrine of discovery perspective rather than the perspective which says, let's get together and understand who we are so that we can allow each other to be who we are without forcing another person to do what we want them to do. That's kind of a lot, and it's kind of all jumbled up, but that's kind of what you get today. And I am hoping that you go from here thinking about it. I'm not saying you have to agree with me, but I'm hoping that you think about these ideas so that we can better understand how we can live a better